Hello and welcome to the latest EnvCast, a Society for the Environment podcast bringing you environmental professionals in conversation each month. My name is Phil Underwood. I'm the engagement manager here at the Society for the Environment. Our podcast is designed to provide insight into the lives of registered environmental professionals, featuring experts from across a wide range of sectors and disciplines. We explore what they do, why they do it, how they got to where they are now, and their future ambitions. Each guest is registered with us as a chartered environmentalist, registered environmental practitioner, or registered environmental technician. As such, they have been externally verified to confirm that they are committed to good environmental practice and working at a proven high level of competence. To learn more about achieving an environmental registration, please visit socenv.org.uk. That's SOCEnv.org.uk. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by someone who I've had many communications with during my time at SocEnv, a chartered environmentalist who has supported numerous parts of my engagement work with features on webinars and campaigns. And in BC times, before COVID, I bumped into him at all sorts of different events because he does seem to be everywhere and doing the good work that he does. I'm also quite excited about today's EnvCast because I get the feeling that discussions are likely to range from somewhere around Wombles to all the way up to CIWM presidency. So if that doesn't keep people watching or listening, I don't know what will, and I think I might give up at that stage. I am, of course, talking about Dr. Adam Reed. He's a chartered environmentalist via his membership of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, which is CIWM. So thank you very much for joining us today, Adam.
Hi, Phil. Thank you for the invite.
You're quite welcome. So to kick things off in the traditional EnvCast way, could you tell us a little bit about what you currently do?
Well, a man of many hats and little hair, I think is how I would summarize that. So my day job is Director of External Affairs at SUEZ UK, the Recycling, Waste Management, Resource Management Company. So an External Affairs Director is one of those great titles that everybody goes, oh yeah, and then they go, what do you do? So for those that don't understand the role, I lobby, I influence, I spend a lot of time with MPs, showing them our sites, getting them to understand some of the policy issues that we're facing. I spend a lot of time with civil servants. You know, there's a lot of policy reform happening in the resources and waste sector at the moment. So, you know, we're trying to help them understand it, but equally we're trying to understand how they see the world and make sure that, you know, the future's better and brighter. And then I sit on a lot of technical working groups across the sector and outside the sector, working with, you know, great organisations that, you know, the IGD on groceries, Ink Pen on packaging, for example, just getting a more collaborative view of how the world needs to evolve. So that's the day job. And then, you know, if that wasn't enough, then, you know, I've been, I think it's 6 months now, I've been president of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management, a professional body that's been close to my personal and professional life for some 25 years now. And so on their behalf, I suppose I get another external role, don't I? I get to go and open some meetings and chair some events and front up at some policy working groups. And to be honest, if it hadn't been for COVID, I'd have been out and about even more, and we may have had to clone me. But we're having a good go at being visible and engaged whilst we promote my presidential theme, which is skills, green skills, and the transition to the circular economy. So it's been a really interesting time, what with COP back in November and the decarbonisation agenda. I've been amazed by how many different working groups and events and consultations I've been able to get involved in with one of those hats. So there's never a dull day in the Reed household.
I can imagine so. I mean, COVID's probably helped your mileage there then, I imagine.
My carbon footprint's significantly better, yes.
I can imagine so, yes, yeah. So that, in all of those roles really, the balance between your environmental work or your technical knowledge in that sense, and the engagement side, that's hugely important to what you do, I guess. That there must be a balance there, and I suppose some of the things you do are further towards one end, and some of the things you do are more the engagement side, but they must meet quite often, I guess.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think I've always been technical. So I used to be a consultant. I was in local government briefly. I ran a research unit in a university for 5 years. So technical's always been my core. but I've always been a communicator. Even on the football field, I was the guy at the back organising the troops. I've always been the one that kind of sees the big picture and helps get people in the right place. So I think as my career's developed, I've recognised that I wasn't always the most technical person in the room, but I was really good at taking technical chat and making it accessible to a range of stakeholders. So I always benchmark myself against, can I make that easy to comprehend for my 10-year-old or my mum, or somebody that's just landed from outer space. And if I can make sure that, the packaging tax or extended producer responsibility can be understood in a bite-sized way, then I think I'm doing my job properly.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I know it makes a lot of sense because I've learned quite a lot from you over the last few years. Admittedly, you might not know that, but given that we've worked together a few times, and I come from a comms background, not an environmental background, but going into working with the Society of the Environment, clearly there's an element of mixing the two there as well. Now, I won't confess to having anywhere near as much knowledge as you, but the way in which you go about it is very useful and quite useful for me to learn from. So
that's nice of you to say. And I think it's interesting you coming sort of almost the opposite direction to me, that comms into environment, whereas I was environment into comms. But I think it's that middle ground that's the important bit. I mean, there are great scientists out there and there are great behavioural change experts, but I think you need people that can live comfortably in the grey water, who can navigate, difficult technical issues for an audience that really can't spend a long time reading the Climate Change Committee report. And I think that's what you and I do best.
You might do. Yeah. Now, given you've just mentioned COP26 and talking about the engagement side of things and clearly the environmental issues that surround COP26, which are pretty vast, and it's kind of coming towards the top of the agenda again. How much of the engagement side is it more important now than ever with those kind of events happening, do you think?
I think it's more important now than ever, just because we really are running out of time to make the kind of step changes we need to. And, it's not my generation alone that can make or break this, because actually it's my son's generation that are probably going to be key to this as they come through the system. And therefore, if we don't start to socialize the issues in a really clear way, if we don't explain the options, if we don't share the science in an accessible way, then I feel we're going to fail ourselves and generations to come, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to kind of redirect the ship. COP was good in that it gave us a focal point, but it's over. Yes, we've got a year of being president, but in reality, that media frenzy, that was November. Now we're into, every sector's got its own transition to work on. It's got its own agendas to deliver against. And I think, we've utilized the opportunity of COP to raise the bar, but that engagement and communication has to go 2 or 3 more levels now. I think, we've got to go schools, we've got to go universities, we've got to go on the street. It's got to be on 6 o'clock news, 1 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news. But it can't only be a news item, because then it becomes a negative message. I think there has to be a positive thing about how we can do better. And some of these decisions that we might have to make about our lifestyles might not cost us more, but we just have to make a conscious decision. At the moment, I'm not sure everybody realizes they've got decisions they can make. I think sometimes, the environmental agenda feels too big, too difficult, too far off in the future. It's not, it's now.
Yeah. And we're starting to look into those, I say starting, we've been looking into those kind of things for a long time now, but we're looking into things like talking with more board level executives and so on. And there is a balance between, on the news, there's a lot of negative stuff, we're polluting the world, that kind of thing. Well, how do you create change out of that? How do you inspire it's clearly not just the people at the top, but they help a lot with making those decisions that trickle down and so on. And there's the positive messages about how you can do that and what kind of influence you could have. There's those little intricacies of extremely useful, and we're starting to look into that and wanting to influence those kind of board level decisions.
I'd fully support that, fella, because I think, board level operators have huge influence. And not only within their own organisations, because of course then their peer-to-peer impact can be massive. And I would suggest that SUEZ, the company that I work for, has always seen itself as a bit of a trendsetter, a market leader, a thought leader. And we want to drag the rest of the industry to our benchmark, not because there's a regulatory line or policy line that says you've got to be here, because for us, that's entry stakes. You've got to be there and beyond, because we have to be doing better with the resources that we handle. So, if we can get more board level operatives involved, if we can get the business leaders of today to see the business opportunities of tomorrow, and I think that's how we couch it when we work with, board level in major manufacturing and retail sectors in particular. It's about the new business model doesn't need to be a threat. This isn't the end of your business. This is just you becoming a new business, a new model, and going early. Being an innovator might give you an unbelievable opportunity in a market space. And I think that's how we've got to, the narrative around the story that is environment is, it's not become a caveman or cave woman and regress. It's embrace circularity, embrace resource efficiency, embrace new technology, and make some rational decisions, but do it early.
Yeah, potentially stand out from the crowd and lead the way.
Absolutely.
There's opportunities out there. So that's exciting stuff for us to look at. And I'm going to point back towards the Chartered Environmentalist registration quite a lot during this podcast, probably, and for obvious reasons, I guess. But part of the chartership is clearly you have to have those technical abilities in your work and the background knowledge. But it's also all about professionalism and different parts of professionalism, like communications and engagement and that kind of thing. How important? I think we've probably covered it to an extent, but how important do you think that is for chartered individuals to have those breadth of skills?
Yeah, I mean, being chartered for me is it's a brand. It's a recognition that you've reached a stage on your professional development, but it isn't the end. And I think people that get a badge shouldn't stop. They should be looking for, well, can I become a fellow, or how do I become president, for example? In my case, there was another tier or two. And I think most of these professional organisations, particularly those that are involved with the Society for the Environment within the umbrella framework, are technical by tradition. There are university pathways, there are apprenticeship pathways, there are on-the-job learning opportunities, but they generally involve you being a technician of some degree who then practices. And that will probably be sufficient to get you a membership in most cases. But I think being able to then communicate what you do and share it and inspire others and run teams and do all the other things that I think a real professional should be doing, because I mean, it's great to be good at your job and to be proficient in your skill set, but I think there's much more comes to being a professional or a chartered, in this case, professional, in that we need to be able to leave a legacy that's better than the one we inherited. We need to be able to inspire the next generation, and that's why I spend so much of my time mentoring both young people and doing STEM ambassadorial work in schools, because I want to see people coming into this space who maybe would never have looked at it, because it would have been, oh, that's not a dentist, that's not that's not a doctor. I want to be a vet, and I'm like, no, you want to save the planet. Look, we're the real superheroes in the environment space, and I think we need to kind of be loud and proud, and therefore, having the ability to communicate and to listen and to be able to mentor and inspire just comes naturally, I think, to wanting to be a professional that's still developing and still giving back long after you've got whatever badge it is that you happen to wear.
Absolutely. It's a continuous development journey, which we advocate completely. Speaking of green skills, you've clearly got some green skills, but there's a bit of a shortage, I would suggest, at the moment. But for a start, what's your journey like in terms of gaining the knowledge and experience that you've got at the moment?
So it's a good question, because everything's got legacy, hasn't it? I mean, I was a geographer, passionate about being out and about. I used to love the interaction between why cities and rural landscapes evolve, and that became an interest in the environmental management agenda, which led to me doing a degree in geography, and also a passionate interest in the Wombles, because anybody that's clearing up litter on Wimbledon Common when you're a kid, kind of, that's inspirational. So that's kind of my foundation, if you like. But And a lot of what I learned back then, I learned climate change from one of the eminent climate scientists of his generation in what, 1992, 93, when very few people were really talking about it seriously. And for me, it was a no-brainer. We are the impact. We are the problem. We need to do things differently. So a lot of my career has been based around how do I lessen the impact of those that I work with and for on the environment. Hence, I became a local authority officer and did what I call my apprenticeship. I understood the issues of wasterising and waste collection at the front end. What is it that people were putting out? Why is it they didn't do it properly? Why is there litter on the street? How do we encourage the public to do it better? That was my first 2 years of getting to grips with the sector. Decided that a PhD, it wasn't the PhD that was important, it was the research. I wanted to work out why policy in the environment space, particularly waste management, wasn't addressing what I could see were the fundamental problems. We didn't have a long-term view. We got a recycling rate that was, 10%, 12%. It really wasn't making any difference. There was no kind of big infrastructure being built. It all seemed like we were the forgotten part of the environment agenda. And I couldn't quite understand why, but I thought that sounded quite an interesting area. So a PhD, which then led to a research group, which led to loads of landfill tax money and me suddenly, having fun being what was then, I suppose you'd call a consultant, but I was living in academia. And then I was headhunted and, 12 years working for 15 years in the end, major consultancies like Arcadis, ERM, and more lately Ricardo, got me to, I got to see the world. I got to see how waste management operates in Eastern Europe. I got to see how it works in Northern Africa. I got to see how it works in the Middle East. Waste is waste, but the cultural context was fascinating. I was learning all the time. The technologies, the money that was involved, completely different. The governance models. And so all of that has helped frame me now into somebody that can, hold my own with a politician, hold my own with a technician, hold my own with, pretty much anybody, including my mum, when it comes to why does this not get recycled and why is it this ends up in a landfill site, etc. And I think I would never try and forget my history, my journey, because it's shaped me as who I am. But I'm not what I was. So I'm still heading forward. And, as I go forward, I realize I still need, particularly on this green skills journey that we're now looking at, because I was already green, but I'm not super green. And I recognize that the future doesn't need to be super green because it needs to be green, but it needs to be economic. It needs to be triple bottom line. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to be social. So, for me, going green in the future, I need to be much better abreast of some of the technologies that are going to be critical in this space. I need to be able to convince people to change business models, particularly in SMEs and such like, where so much of the waste is going to end up being generated. And if we can only change the way they think about ownership of packaging or ownership of products, we might be able to change what is waste and what is just a resource in the wrong hands at the wrong time. And I think there's some really interesting developments to come around, ownership models, for example, under producer responsibility. So for me, green skills of tomorrow is about underpinning a number of environmental sectors going mainstream. It's about going circular from linear, and it's about transition. There are skills that we're going to need for the next 25 years. You think energy from waste, and some people go, Adam, you can't talk about energy from waste when you're talking green. And I can go, well, I can when I'm transitioning from a linear model to a circular model, because you can't click your fingers and magic to a new world where everything works in circular model. You need to transition to high recycling and better design packaging and better decision making and better labeling. And so actually, I like what you might call dark green transitions. They're better than landfill, and they give us time to build the other systems, and they work and they're bankable. And I think, for me, there's a lot of that transition. How do we take staff, including myself, on a journey where you're going to move outside of your comfort zone? You're going to be applying your skills in a different location to a changing feedstock or a different circumstance. And I think the biggest challenge facing the green skills agenda is not the green skills, it's the ability to transition and not get lost by the tension that comes with change, because people don't like change.
Yeah, now that's an interesting one, because like you say, transition is highly important. It has to happen. It doesn't, there's no switch involved. And there's so many different examples of that. we can't have electric cars. There's not enough charging points. Well, there's a transition. You can't just have them there and then at the click of a finger.
And I think transition is something you don't get taught at university. You can't go, even if you go on an MBA, I don't think they really, and let's be honest, I've got a couple of MBA students in my team at the moment, so I've been supervising them. And I don't think they get transition. They get resilience, but transition's a completely different thing because you're not always sure what you're going to end up as. So this kind of metamorphosis is a little bit uncontrolled. And that can be very, very scary for an individual who has been comfortable for 20 years doing pretty much the same chemical engineering or mechanical engineering type role to suddenly then be told, well, you're now going to be, in a chemical recycling facility. We're not quite sure what's coming in. We're not quite sure what the end market's going to be, but it's going to be a fascinating journey. And you can imagine how an engineer of 20 years is going, I don't like journeys.
Yeah. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming there's a challenge there between skills of, let's say, non-green roles and so on. And then you've got the skills of very much green roles.
Yes.
But then the middle bit, is that lacking?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I think they're all lacking. I mean, I think my presidential theme, the report that I commissioned, the work I've been doing with Department for Education and DEFRA and Bayes in the last 6 months, all leads me to the same conclusion, which is we haven't mapped clearly what the green skills employment needs of 2035 are. Some sectors have had a start, and I could tell you that the circular economy needs 450 to 500,000 new employees with new skills by 2035. But going beyond that, trying to work out how many of these and how many of those and where are they going to be in the UK, that's a much harder question. So if we don't know what the number is in waste management, resource management, circularity, definitely, we certainly don't know what it is in the power sector or the transport sector or the chemical sector or the manufacturing sector. So we've got to amalgamate all of these. How many do we need? And the answer might be 100,000 green chemists, for example. Well, that's great. So then we can build the university courses and the content that goes, I need 100,000 green chemists by 2035. And some of the modules need to be about applying that in a manufacturing. Some of them need to be about closed loop recycling systems. And some of them are going to be more traditional chemistry type stuff. Fine. Okay, that's great. University is brilliant. But that doesn't tell you anything about the value chain that's going to supply those 100,000 chemists, green chemists, with the stuff that they need to work. And they might be apprentices, people that have retrained from retail, or they've retrained from being a waste manager. Who knows what they are? But we've not mapped that value chain properly. And we've not given a roadmap. So I can't work out how many I need in 2030. And I don't know whether the power sector wants them in 2028 or whether the transport sector wants them in 2032. Now, if we all want them in the same 2 or 3 years, we're going to have a glut of newly trained, highly expert, let's call chemical engineers for now, in a 5-year window. But we won't be able to produce enough of them to get them all available to start on day one. And yet they'll all be unemployable after 10 years because we'd have done all of that transition. And now you'll only need a small number to keep the facilities running. I just think without that kind of mapping, I don't know how academia responds to that demand. And I don't know how the technical colleges respond to that demand. And that's before I answer your question, which was the stuff in the middle. Because yeah, I mean, I need to teach people to listen. I need to teach people to be resilient. I need to teach people to improve their behavior skills and their communication skills. Systems thinking is another one that came out of my presidential report. The ability to see a system and not look at your silo or your niche and go, we're okay. And then the whole of the rest of the world is collapsing around you, but I'm okay. If I do this, what happens to the system? We need more systems thinking. We need more AI. We need better data management. We need better data analysts. The whole scenario testing. If we do this, what will we get? Because it's only by doing all of that that we're going to get the right policy framework, regulatory framework, and therefore investment from industry that's going to make the transition happen. So I think there's an awful lot of work still to be done and an awful lot of opportunity for stuff at both the very technical and the somewhat non-technical in the middle transition skill set.
Yeah. And that, in terms of your thinking of your own journey, I think you said back in the early 90s, where climate change wasn't really thought about. And now we're talking about these deadlines and so on for the need for these huge amounts of green skills, a bit of crystal ball thinking about how many you're going to need and in what areas and what technology is going to be like in 10 or 5 years time, 20 years time, who knows. Things have changed a lot in the last few years. Do you think they're going to continue to change rapidly, or should I say rapidly enough? Certainly they're going to be changing more.
Yeah, I mean, it's your speed of transition is an interesting question, isn't it? I once got asked to give a presentation about the world of waste management in I think it was 2135. Why pick that year? I don't know. But it was to reflect the fact that the Institute had been around for 100 years. So we did 100 years backwards looking. And then I kind of did this futuristic look. And I was like, well, it's really hard to predict the future 5 years from now, because actually think about computers, think about your phone, think about the cars we drive, think about the aircraft. The last 50 years, I mean, even plastic. Plastic packaging, where was that before 1950? I mean, the world has exponentially, developed a rate of knots, and the influence of society on the environment has been equally as massive and growing, hence climate change. And I think trying to predict the next 5 years, I mean, I think, we're seeing nano materials coming into, in terms of products and packaging that, nobody could possibly have understood before. We're seeing technologies like chemical recycling that mean you can suddenly recycle stuff that you thought was, designed as single use, particularly things like, crisp packets or chocolate bar wrappers. And I think, one of the big new great white hopes is carbon capture, utilization and storage, isn't it? Were we talking about that 5 years ago? 2 years from now, we could have some very large operational facilities in the UK proving that it absolutely does what it says on the tin, in which case there could be a massive swing of technology, use and evolution in a short period of time, just because we've now proven that the concept is deliverable at the kind of scale that we need. But, if somebody said to me, what does 2035, 2040 look like? It's only ever going to be a best guess, but you're going to have, hopefully, less materials circulating. Those that are in the circulation pot will circulate properly, i.e. they're designed for, reuse and repair, not designed for recycling as the ultimate. And we build a much more, collective, coherent system where everything has been designed with an end use or a secondary use or a downstream, opportunity built into it, if you like. So it's much more holistic, and therefore I'm not pessimistic that the next 5 years isn't deliverable, because I think, technology innovation does happen at that speed. I just worry that the policy framework has to be enabling and not stifling. Otherwise, the technology innovation may just get, kind of hung out to dry on the margins. And that would be a shame given what's going on in the marketplaces that I see.
Yeah. And I assume alongside the developments of technology and the ability to do things like reuse, repair, recycle, whatever it might be, in many instances you could do that. It's an option, but then the engagement side comes in to if it's something that's used by the public, because there's a lot of use and throw away essentially. You have to have the knowledge to make the most of those opportunities, I guess. So what do you put in the recycling bin? What can you repair based on the difference in warranty policy that's in place now and that kind of thing? It's quite a mix. You've got to have a lot of people on board.
Well, we've spent 25 years getting a recycling rate in the UK from 5% to nearly 50%, let's call it. And for much of that time, I spent my career doing behaviour change with local authorities. So I did a lot of the rollout of the early food waste collections. I did a lot of the early alternate weekly residual waste collections, the pioneers of shrinking the amount of residual capacity that you had. And all of that had unbelievable amounts of communication. We were going door to door. We were doing advisory workshops. We were, new social media as it came to our sector. And yet we're still at 45%, 50%. And there's still 30% of the British public don't recycle very often at all. And when they do, they get it wrong. So if you're asking everybody, my mum included, to switch to go refillable, let's take coffee cups. Post-COVID, everybody starts to commute to wherever it is that they go. How many of them are taking the reusable coffee cup, of which I have many, and how many of them are going to forget, or I've never had one, and are going to start walking around with a branded piece of, heated paper that is probably not actually as recyclable as they were hoping. And if we're lucky, they might put it in the right bin, but there's a good chance they won't. I mean, I do worry about the ability for us to switch from a model that was all about, well, I can recycle it and that's the best I can hope for, but if not, it goes in a bin, to one where you're going, you know what, you've got to really think about what you buy at the supermarket or online. And then you've got to think even harder about which box, bin, bag you put it in, because some of it needs to go back for repair, which means you definitely don't want to mix it with anything else. I mean, that's a generational time frame, in my opinion. It took us 25 years to get recycling to be kind of the norm, albeit not perfect. I think it's 25 years before we get everybody going, do you know what? This reuse stuff, it's easy.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll just become the norm. I mean, that's the aim, isn't it?
It is, but it's going to take a while to undo the training that people, I was brought up with a certain mindset, cheap goods, recycling makes me feel good. How do I undo that? Like, with a lot of effort and a lot of very clear science, and it can't be, bamboozling the science. It has to be very clear, and it has to be repetitive, and it has to be over a period of time. And that isn't cheap. And the question I'm always asked is, who should pay for that? Because the government, well, that's not our job, is it? But if you don't lead from the front, then who's going to follow? I get told it's industry's job. You should do it. And I'm like, what? It's not the waste manager's job, surely. I mean, I'm not the one. I'm just clearing up after you. It's the brands. And you're going to see so much more of Coca-Cola and other brands, of course, starting to direct customers to operating in a different way, because actually their reach, their influence is probably more significant than anybody else's.
Yeah. Well, who is best placed to tell me which bin to put my 1-year-old's biodegradable nappies in? So I don't have a compost bin because I haven't got a room for it. So where does it go? I'm
not sure I'd be putting that in a compost bin, even if I could.
No, exactly, yeah. But if it goes off to be burnt in an incinerator, then what's the point on having a biodegradable nappy? That kind of thing.
And you have to be careful that you don't undermine that journey, because and I remember this from the early days of having recycling collections in Kensington and Chelsea in 1995, 96. We had the first split back vehicles. So you had the left side of the vehicle was recycling and the right side of the vehicle was rubbish, which meant everybody in Kensington still got 2 collections of rubbish every week, which was unique and exactly what the resident wanted. But they also got 2 collections of recycling every week, which was unheard of anywhere in the country. And yet people were like, it's all going to the tip, isn't it? And they didn't even know where the tip was. It's magic fairy, tip. And we were like, no, it's going in the back. And my day job, take them around the back of the lorry. Oh, I had no idea. That's why you want a bag of recycling, because it goes in the left. But the minute they get that message that, recycling site was closed, or that bin was contaminated and it's all gone to landfill, well, they're like, why am I bothering? If that's how easy it can all go wrong, then you just undermine performance, which is why we've still got so many people that really don't do it that often. That's a worry when you transition to something as fundamentally different as, I'm going to buy a pair of jeans, but I'm never going to own them. I'm going to lease them from a jean company, and they're going to change the jeans to suit my size and figure, and if I need a repair, they'll repair them. I mean, that's a whole different ball game from going down to any one of those cheap shops where you can buy them for a tenner, and it doesn't matter if you've got 6 pairs in your cupboard. One of them will fit.
Yeah. And that value on the resources you have, that's a huge
Absolutely.
thing.
And I think that's where the climate change agenda can help, because if we start to value the environment and the activities that we take within it, we might start to change the way that we value the items that we own and use, because we've just been sold, cheap stuff for too long, and it's just been unsustainable, but it's only now catching up with us.
Yeah. Now, we've talked a lot about, lots of different challenges, lots of different opportunities. Things are happening at a rapid pace. In a slightly shorter time frame, so you said you've been in your presidency role for 6 months.
Yep.
I assume that's a year long.
Yes, it is. Yep.
So by the end of the next 6 months, what are your hopes for, what are you hoping to achieve essentially with that green skills agenda?
So there's a few things that I set out when I pitched for the presidency, if you like. One was to make us relevant, to make the institution relevant, to talk with an authoritative voice, to be in the room with government when they're discussing policy. And that wasn't just DEFRA, by the way, that was BAYES and increasingly Department for Education as well. And I think we're on the journey. We're getting those invites now. So that's happening. And I'm confident we will continue to do that. I wanted the skills map that we identified to become a roadmap, a transition plan for our sector over the next decade. And we're just about to launch the new learning and development strategy for the CIWM. And this will be the first time we've really looked at that 10-year transition. Which areas, which skill sets are going to need to grow and grow rapidly? What courses are we going to need to support? Which other institutions will we need to work with so that we're developing those skills in the best possible way? Because you don't need 90 professional institutions all trying to create the same, kind of core content. I think we've got to be much more collaborative. I think SocEnv has got a really key role to play in that. So that'll be out in the next month. And then, the back half of my presidential will be about embedding that. I'll be spending a bit more time with other institutions, getting them on board and trying to leave I say legacy because I ultimately I want to leave a learning and development strategy that's got foundations. I want to leave some new relationships that have got momentum, and I want to leave that platform with government that we're now credible and we've got some stake in the game. I think if I get all that done in my 12 months, I'll be happy because I would have locked CIWM into some very clear pathways. We've got a new strategy on diversity, inclusion. Coming out, which I think is an important part of the transition. You can't transition to green skills without also recognizing that the industry needs to transition more generally. So I think that's important. And we've also got a new scientific and technical structure within CIWM that will be launched later this year, which is again reflecting the fact that we're not the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. We're not the Chartered Institute of Landfill. We're the Chartered Institution of Resource and Waste Management. We need to be the bastions of circularity. We need to be, talking about business models as much as we do about energy from waste. And I think, again, leaving that alongside the EDI and the L&D strategy means I think I leave CIWM, not that I'm disappearing, but, taking the chain off. I've put them on a new path that is much more credible for the world that I think we want to operate in and the world that we will have a significant stake in, if you like.
That's a serious amount of work and all of it very credible, which is excellent to hear about. And I guess when we're talking about green skills, you're talking about people coming into the market, I guess, initially. So whether they're youngsters or whatever they might be, but also people, again, using the word transition, I suppose, reskilling into roles that will support the push for a greener, more sustainable world, I guess. It's a mixture of the two. Yes.
So part of our plan of work is to understand the skills that we've got today. Let's get the benchmark right. Which of those roles in particular are going to struggle? A bit like when coal mines started to close and the power industry changed. Actually, many of those power people ended up in the waste industry because we needed people to run power plants, albeit they were fed by waste. So it's recognizing that certain types of job might start to decline, but those skill sets could be transferable with a little bit of finessing. So we're mapping that first. But I'm more, and don't get me wrong, that's really important because we got 130,000 people in the waste industry, and I would argue probably half of those are going to have to transition in what will be uncomfortable times for some of them. I'm sure geography may have to change, even with leveling up. I can't imagine all of those jobs will just transition from declining industry sectors to green industry sectors. It won't be that easy. So I think there's going to be some difficult decisions to make. But if I'm passionate about one thing more than transitioning and sort of mentoring people on that journey, it's the attractiveness of our sector. I want my son and his class to be going, yeah, I want to study geography. I want to study environmental science. I want to study physics. I want to study chemistry. I want to do an A-level in environmental science, climate change. I want to understand policy. I need to have data skills and AI skills because I'm going to go to university or I'm going to go to college and I'm going to learn how to apply that in the chemistry sector, the manufacturing sector, the engineering skills, whatever it might be. And I think this is much bigger than STEM. So although I'm a STEM ambassador, I'm also a Royal Geographical Society ambassador. I go into schools advocating geography as a discipline. I don't want to be too narrow, because they are too narrow still. I think, climate change is actually bigger than geography in some respects, albeit they're closely aligned. And for me, I want to know that there's 150,000 newbies heading in my direction in 3 years' time, all going, well, I've heard this is the saving the planet, career 101. Yeah. And I fancy a slice of that, because I want to be doing my bit, and it'd be great. Oh, and I'm going to get paid all right as well. It's not just, tree huggers and volunteers. This is proper career, 30 years later, grown through the ranks, now CEO, et cetera, changing the world. I think we've got to do a much better job of mapping out how green sectors are viable, credible development opportunities with real jobs, with proper salaries, and the doing a good thing is just the icing on the cake, because why wouldn't you do that rather than be, a doctor, dentist, or vet?
Yeah, which links massively to what SocEnv is trying to do with the having environmental professionals across all sorts of different sectors, every sector, in fact, because it all has an impact. When you talk about the impacts or the things that impact climate change and so on, every sector does. Some of them much more positively than others, but you still need environmental professionals in there to limit current risks and to develop new technologies to change those risks into opportunities and so on. So there's a huge amount of opportunities out there at the moment, certainly compared to many years ago.
I think the potential number of members for SocEnv or for the Chartered Institute of Waste Management or whoever is almost limitless at the moment, because I would argue, as you do, we need people embedded in every sector, in every location. And it's quite interesting, actually. I mean, SUEZ is a waste management company by training, and 5,500 staff doing frontline waste management, and then you've got the backroom staff keeping the machine rolling. And yet I've got 300 plus environment champions volunteering in my business through my team to embed environmental best practice on each and every site, from beehives and wild seeding at EFWs to litter, beach cleanups in Cornwall. The list is endless, and the fact you create this network of, some of them are true green, some of them are geographers that are frustrated, and some of them just, they're accountants that want to do something for the community. But I don't care, because I can harness that. And those 300, well, they're affecting, 3,000. And actually, the benefit that you get from them in the community, so the benefit we're having on the people that we work with and for, is immense. And I think, could I make them all, chartered? Maybe not, but 4 or 5 years down the line, why not? Because the work that they're doing, even if they're an accountant or they work in HR or whatever, the fact is that they're delivering change and they're passionate about it. And they're two of the fundamental requirements for me for being chartered, is you're passionate about it and you're doing it. And I think, there's a huge amount of opportunity out there for us to embed ourselves with other sectors who just need a little prompt now and again to make the right decisions. Yeah.
So with your colleagues in mind and your career journey, what would you say to others thinking about a career in environment and jumping on the opportunities that are out there for green skills and so on?
Well, I think number one, there probably isn't a sector that's going to grow as fast as the green skill space. So the environment is a sound investment opportunity in terms of your career.
It's not going away.
No, absolutely. And some of these others are going to suffer. Recession is going to hit some sectors that, the post-COVID, post-commute issue. I just can't see some of the sectors bouncing back anywhere near as well as they were holding up before. So I think the environment's I think we've got a good 30-year horizon. You can see all the targets. You can see all the, global initiatives. Look at the SDGs, look at the strategies. There's just so much attention, and the public, my mum included, are committed to seeing this being better. So for all the evidence suggests this is growth time. That's number one. Number two, how many sectors can you work in where you are actually saving the planet? I mean, I want to wear my pants outside my trousers. I want a cape. Why
And
why can't
you
I?
do.
Well, yeah, that's another story. But why can't I be a superhero? I mean, when I sell this to kids in school, it's about being a superhero. Being an eco warrior is not about hugging a tree and stopping somebody building a retail park. Yep. This is about making real change for society that's going to ensure that the planet survives and develops positively for their kids and beyond. So I think they're the two angles. Being a superhero and it's a great market, you'd be mad not to. And then the third one, I think, is a little bit more personal. It's just, I think people that work in this space are just good people. I'm surrounded by people that would go out of their way to help me out, and I have over my career. And I don't always get the same message when you talk to your mates, at the rugby club, the football club, when you're out, the tennis courts or whatever. Yeah. A lot of them are moaning, and I'm just thinking, I just love the people I work with. And I've always loved the people because they've all got the same commitment to wanting to be better themselves and the planet. And I think, that's something that you can't get in every sector. So, if you want to feel good about yourself and you're going to be surrounded by people that want to do similar, it's a great place to be. And it can only get better, I think.
There you go. And there's plenty of places to find information, apprenticeships, professional bodies. Talk to your teachers.
Well, there's so many entry points. You're absolutely right. And you can come to it late. I mean, some of those environmental champions we've got working for us, they've never been interested in the environment specifically from a career perspective, but now they're gaining so much more opportunity and traction. And I think, never be shy of asking a question. I get emails, and it always amazes me how people get hold of my email. But I suppose I'm as you said at the beginning, I am quite visible. So
everywhere.
So, why not try? But I get emails from people saying, I'd love to have a job, or I'd love to do what, blah, blah. And I'm like, I respond to these people, and I'll have half an hour. I was talking to somebody in China the other week. They were out there teaching English, but they really wanted to get into the environment space. And I was like, well, let's talk about it. What are you thinking of doing? When are you coming back? Where are you going to be? What skills have you got? I've always got half an hour for somebody, always, because people had half an hour for me. And I think, never be afraid of asking for a bit of advice, because I know SocEnv will always give them some good advice and point them in the right direction. CIWM would do the same. And I think it's really important that, just because you don't know who to ask doesn't mean you shouldn't ask.
Very true. Very true. I have two more questions for you. Okay. One of which I hesitate to ask because I can't imagine the list you're going to give me. But you've already given me a few things that are coming up. But essentially, what's next for you? Presidency is the next 6 months. Mm-hmm. Are any exciting challenges that are coming up that you're particularly looking forward to?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I look at things in bite-sized chunks, and although I've planned careers, I've never overly planned them because there's too many variables that you can't control. So 6 months is a good start for 10, and CIWM is going to keep me busy, and we've got some strategies being launched, and they're really important to the future of the institution and the sector. So I'm really looking forward to those. And it'd be good to get around to a couple of the centres that I've not been to physically during COVID, because it's always nice to go and see, the members who are doing some great stuff themselves in their own ways. So there's that. We've also got some massive policy reform going on in the UK. Extended producer responsibility, deposit returns. We've got consistent collections, plastic tax. We've got the Environment Act as is. Single-use plastic bans or not bans. The next 6 months, I'm going to be very, very busy, responding to some of those, influencing some of those before they come out, and making sure that we do set ourselves up to have the best possible framework so that, when I've stopped being president and I go back to the day job full-time, we can start building the services and infrastructure that's going to give us a 25-year transition that's good and efficient and delivers on all the targets and expectations around the environment that we're all committed to. So that's my slightly longer time frame. Beyond that, who knows? I mean, I've always been one of those kind of open door guys. And, if somebody knocks on my door and says, Adam, do you fancy a bit of this? I'm like, well, let's go and have a coffee and we'll work it out. China Cup, of course.
Well, so there's lots of possibilities there, it's fair to say. Last question, which we ask everyone on EnvCast.
Okay.
And possibly some of your answers just then may link into this. If you're able to influence world leaders for a day, what would be the first thing you'd do, or what would you focus on?
Wow. Hey, that's a toughie, isn't it? I was hoping you were going to ask me about my desert island disc.
Not this time.
What would I do? World leaders. Well, I think the issue is very different from geographies, from north to south in particular. So it may be quite impossible to get all world leaders to agree to any one thing, even if it was for one day. So I think I would go back to COP, jump in my TARDIS, have a bit of time travel, and I'd put resource consumption and resource management right at the heart of COP, because food waste wasn't on the COP agenda and resources weren't on the COP agenda. And I think if you're going to talk to the global leaders about what tomorrow has to look like in terms of climate change, you can't do it without resource being well managed and us not living on a three planet, not living three planet style and living one planet style. And I think that would be my call to governments would be, here's the evidence, here's the vision. This is going to be difficult. Some of you can't live the Western style and consume because you think it's the right. Some of you are going to have to kind of control things. Some of you are just going to have to buy into some difficult, activity, but there is only one planet and we have only got a finite period of time before we've overly degraded it. So I think, that would be my message, and COP would have been my platform for it.
Okay, good message. And I think, if my memory serves me right, in terms of one planet, I think that's the theme for World Environment Day 2022.
Rightly so.
It's a useful connection point there. Good. Right. Well, so all that's left to say now is thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a very interesting insight into what you've done so far, what you're doing currently, and I wish you all the best of luck with your next 6 months of the CIWM presidency and everything else that follows that. So thank you very much indeed, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks very much, Phil. Look forward to the next time we cross swords, and in the meantime, stay healthy. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you. If you would like to find out more about the Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner and Registered Environmental Technician registrations, we have plenty of webinars and guidance available on our website, socenv.org.uk. You can also find insights on our YouTube channel. Just search for Society for the Environment on YouTube and you'll be able to find our channel there. To stay connected, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at SocEnv_HQ, and follow our LinkedIn page, which is Society for the Environment with SocEnv in brackets at the end. We will release a new episode on the first Wednesday of each month. So if you're interested in future podcasts, please press subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes. You can do this through a variety of platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Castbox. Please feel very free to leave us some very nice feedback as well. It always helps. Thank you very much for listening or watching on YouTube. We look forward to seeing you at the next episode next month.